Okay, hi. My name is Shiva. I'll be presenting on safeguarding PHI in the AWS environment. I'm working as a senior cloud engineer in a company called Realtek. We process healthcare claims, what we get from the insurance companies. So this is based on the experience building our own infrastructure. Uh, so why we need to safeguard healthcare data? Because it's important data, personal data, and we are seeing the cybersecurity threats all over, and we just need to make sure that data is safe and we are securing it properly. That's true. I just didn't say that. So those are the stakes. Let's first start with where we're getting this data from. So typically when we go to the healthcare provider, we fill the forms, and also the providers will fill the forms and send this to the insurance companies. So either your company is handling this data from the insurance side, from the provider side, or some insurance companies send this data to some other vendors to actually process this data. That's where our company works. Data from insurance companies come to us, and then we process it and send it back to them. Uh, so this is the regulatory landscape. We need to be compliant with some laws, HIPAA laws. We also need to be compliant with SOC 2 and high trust rules when you are dealing with the healthcare data. Uh, these are different controls, just a list of them. So what AWS provides, AWS has several services which are already compliant with the HIPAA and all these rules. Uh, there's a big list of all the services that AWS provides, uh, which are compliant with this. Just these are the major services which people typically use, and something that we use as well. So before we start discussing, like if you are working for a small healthcare company or starting out a new project, that's the scenario we're going to try to go through. So where you need to start with is the basics. The basics is with the uh, authentication. Make sure you have a single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, uh, and you have a different users in your company, people who needs to access this data, infrequently access this data, or never need to access this data. And you can divide these roles based on the teams, based on their roles. Uh, Try to provide only the least privilege, least access that they need based access. And also you can also provide conditional access. There are different AWS resources that you can use to set up these primarily. For example, if you are trying to set up the single sign-on authentication, AWS has a feature called AWS Identity Provider, which integrates with any identity providers. Uh, and then you can go on creating the roles, and those roles will have all the permissions that you can provide to separate set of identity groups. So that's the first basic thing that you need to get right before you start uh, thinking about different set of services. So we'll start going into major services that people typically use when storing the data. So one of the things that first comes to mind when we talk about AWS is S3, where it's object storage. uh, what are the different things that you can do when you are setting up S3 buckets for storing PHI data? Make sure your bucket is not publicly accessible. That's a well-known thing. And if you are handling data for different clients or different insurance providers or different healthcare providers, some companies need that you use different encryption keys for all the data. So make sure you're encrypting the data, make sure you're using a different encryption keys, uh, rotating your encryption keys and all that. And also one of the things that AWS provides is for the S3 buckets, you also have something called bucket policies. You can use these bucket policies to granularly regulate what people can do within that. For example, so this is one such policy. Uh, So what you could start with is completely deny everyone access, so nobody can access this data. So you would start with the deny policy, so nobody can access this data, and then you would go on to start providing specific access to a set of folders, and then provide what roles can actually edit the data, what roles can actually view the data, and what roles can delete this data. And if you are using something like a Terraform, based on our experience, what we have seen is these roles will keep changing, and you probably want to put it in a variable. And whenever a new role has to access the data, keep adding that, like keep editing that variable instead of going back to that whole Terraform module and changing the module itself. So that's for the S3 buckets uh, and RDS. Uh, So same things again, basic principles. Make sure to encrypt your data. Regarding the authorization of accessing the databases, make sure you have separate roles for different use cases. Don't reuse the credentials, obviously. And then try to make sure they have different granular permissions for the databases within the instances, all that. And then when your service needs to access these RDS instances, make sure you are preferably trying not to use database user ID password. Uh, Use something like instance roles when your service is running in EC2 instances, or roles, assign these roles to service accounts in Kubernetes, and then use that to access the databases instead of using ID and password. And if you have to use ID and password, uh, put them in the secrets manager and use that. Uh, uh, that's it. Uh, so you have your right now. We talked about having your raw data either in S3 buckets, your processed or raw data in the RDS instances. There should be a way for you to provide access to developers, especially when you are in a small stage, small company. Uh, More people needs to have access to the databases. How do you provide access to the databases uh, or to your S3? So one of the things, especially very typical for healthcare data, is you want to make sure that data is not actually downloaded into your laptops. Then how do you access that? We want to open those files and look at them. One of the one of the services provided by AWS is AWS Workspaces. These are virtual desktops. You can have Windows, Mac, Linux, any kind of OS desktops. Uh, these can be integrated with your SSO, like Okta or some other authentication. With it would have a client within the browser, or a Mac OS app or Windows OS app, uh, where you would download the data, look at the data, and then you can delete that workspaces again. So you are not actually downloading the PHI data into your laptops, like trying to keep it safe. And there are a lot of controls that you can put on these virtual images. You can put security controls over it so that nobody can actually download this data or upload this data from there. And then these workspaces can be restricted to specific VPCs, and then you can put policies on your either your S3 buckets or RDS or where your data is, and make sure people are not actually able to download the data into their laptops and just into these workspaces, so they can download them, open them, do their work, and then you can maintain these workspaces to either remove the workspaces or do something like that. I probably stepped on the cable. Okay. Yep. So these workspaces have different types of instances I mentioned. You can configure the size of these instances. we have logging available. We can use all that to make sure your data is safe when people have to actually open and look at your PHI data. So this is another service. This is especially useful. We talked about scenario where your developers have to access your PHI data. Now again. Okay, okay, sorry. So we're talking about accessing the healthcare data, which is either in your S3 buckets or is in your RDS. So we talked about workspaces where you can actually download the data, look at the data, and make sure it is safe. So another place that you can do this is with Athena. So from Athena, you can actually run queries on the data in your S3 buckets, or uh, if your developers actually directly want to access the databases, you would typically do that by having a jump instance in the network and try to access it from there. You could also have a database client within the workspaces and access it from there, or you can also do it from the Kubernetes cluster like a jump pod and then access the database. In all these instances, there is a possibility of either you have to provide the credentials or somebody accessing the credentials. Uh, you can also do it without credentials even there, but the Athena provides a nice interface within the AWS where you can only provide read-only access to the databases, production databases. They can run the queries. You can provide the you have ability to granularly manage the permissions within the Athena, and all the communication is encrypted, results are encrypted. And then but if you are using Athena in order to directly access the database, uh, you will start noticing that people will use this in order to create business reports as well. So make sure you are using read-only instances when you are connecting Athena to RDS. uh, that's what we observe. I'm specifically talking about security within the EKS because that's more popular now. Uh, the things that you can do within the EKS is basic things. Start with the RBAC implementation, have different roles, link them to your roles that you have already created in the AWS IAM. Uh, yeah, link IAM roles for service accounts. Make sure you are using the service accounts when you are accessing your data from the cluster. Like I didn't mention the obvious things like make sure your data is encrypted, make sure your workloads are working are all in the private subnets, all that. Uh, this is one of the important things that we need to like we are required to do when you are dealing with the healthcare data. Uh, AWS provides some of these inbuilt services for us in order to be stay compliant. So make sure you are logging, all the metrics are available to you. You are monitoring what's going on with your workloads, what the people are doing within your uh, organization. Uh, Compliance again. So you're not just for the business continuity, you're also actually required to uh, keep the data, whatever you are provided with when you are dealing with the healthcare data. So make sure you have the versioning turned on. People are unable to delete the data from the S3 buckets. Uh, AWS has this nice service called AWS Backup Service, which can be used to back up databases, S3 buckets, and all that stuff. So make sure you're using them. Put put your backups in a different region. Maybe we have gone through an instance where we accidentally deleted a database, and fortunately we had a backup in a different region and were able to put it back. Yeah, seems obvious. Yes, have incident response plan. Uh, have people who will like one takeaway would be run through run through scenarios where you are even before you see some kind of an incident. uh, have a scenario like role playing incident where you would go through an incident and then see what role people would be playing, like go through uh, each point of time, like when you detect an incident, declare an incident, uh, start recording the uh, all the major events that are happening when you are going through an incident, how you would recover from it, reporting about it, have a plan for that. So that's where we go through incident response and preparedness. There is a separate team for it. We do. It's hybrid. Like there are a couple of people who are dedicated to do this, but even the SRE cloud team are also involved. I think it's typically that's how it's done. There will be people who are dedicated to doing this, and there are other people who are expertise in handling the infrastructure and all that. They also need to be trained and involved in these training sessions and all that. That's it. Any questions? We are a small company, small team, but we're awesome. If you're interested, that's our company name. You can connect with me. I can recommend you. About the your data. It's a healthcare data. It comes with your name, your address, what health conditions you have, what kind of uh, procedures were done on you, what kind of claims you, yeah, what kind of claims are going to the insurance companies, all that data. So everything that's associated with the patient, all the procedures done on it, everything regarding that. Yep. Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, so not just profile stuff like diagnoses. Yep. Like charts and stuff. Yep. That's all.